Hi, this is Kevin at the Virtual Planetarium at Raritan Valley Community College. Welcome to our weekly Star Talk. Today we're going to be talking about a summertime constellation that we can see rising early in the night sky, as well as other space news that we have for you. So let's get started by talking about our moon phases. The next full moon is going to be on May 26th. That is when we have the total lunar eclipse happening. Again, that's not something we'll be able to see from here in New Jersey, unfortunately. We're only going to see a partial lunar eclipse. But it is something we'll be able to catch online. That website that I talked about, timeanddate.com, will actually be live streaming the event. So you can catch it even if you're not in the path of totality. The good thing about this is that you don't have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because the recording will be saved, so you can catch it afterwards as well if you want to see it but not be up at that hour. The last quarter moon is going to be on June 2nd, and then we have a new moon on June 10th. And this new moon is actually going to have its own eclipse. So on June 10th, we're going to have an annular solar eclipse that we're going to be able to see here in New Jersey, but we'll talk about that in one of our next videos. So stay tuned for that. Now let's talk about a summertime constellation that we can see rising earlier and earlier every night. It's actually a pretty big summertime constellation, but it's pretty dim, so it's not all that easy to find. So to do that, we're going to look at our sky. We have our sky set up for 9:30 at night, and we're going to look towards the east. So right now we're looking towards the west. So let's turn our sky around so we're facing east. And we're going to be using two stars that we used in previous videos. So the first star we're going to use is this bright one up here towards the southeast. It's a bright reddish star. It's called Arcturus. A few videos ago, we learned how to find it using the handle of the Big Dipper. You can arc to Arcturus. And then the second star we're going to use is the other bright star we see here called Vega. This star we talked in a previous video as well because it is very close to the horizon, so it flickers a lot and you might confuse it with an airplane. Now to find the summertime constellation, we're going to draw a line from Vega to Arcturus, and then right in between those two stars, there's a group of 4 stars right here. They are pretty hard to see in this software right now, but they're a little easier to see in the real night sky. So you can go outside and it'll be a little easier to see. These 4 stars right here belong to the torso of the constellation of Hercules. Hercules, as you all may recognize the name, is a very famous Greek hero. We talked about him in a previous video when we talked about Leo the lion. Leo was the Nemean lion that Hercules defeated in his first task. And since his conquests are up in the sky, Hercules also made it up to the sky as well. So the whole constellation is actually really, really big, but it's not that bright. So the whole thing is actually pretty hard to piece out, except this center part right here. Since it's only the 4 stars right here, some people call it the keystone. It's pretty easy to find because it's right in between this bright star Vega right here and the other bright star Arcturus right over here. Now, a really neat thing about Hercules is that right in between these 2 stars, there is a hidden gem that you can actually see with just a small pair of binoculars. If you were to point the binoculars directly in between these 2 stars, you'd see a blob of light. This blob of light is actually a collection of hundreds and hundreds of stars. This is what's known as a globular cluster. A globular cluster is just a fancy word for a ball of stars. So there's a bunch of stars that are organized in like a globe in space. Now, like I said, if you look at it through binoculars, it'll just look like a fuzzy patch. But if you were to look at it through a really big telescope, it would look a little something like this. And here you can tell that the very center that just looks like a fuzzy patch is actually a bunch of individual stars, and that's really cool. But again, if you don't have a really big telescope, unfortunately you're not going to be able to see this view, but you will be able to still see it in the sky, even with a small pair of bird-watching telescopes. So point that right in the middle here of these 2 stars in Hercules, and you'll be able to see M13. Now, let's talk about Mars. Just kidding. We're actually not going to talk about the Mars 2020 mission this time, but we are going to be talking about a different Mars mission. Today we're going to be talking about the Chinese Mars mission. China is one of 3 countries to launch a mission to Mars in the summer of 2020. Their mission actually reached Mars orbit on February 10th, and their mission consists of 3 parts. It had an orbiter, it had a lander, and it also had a rover. But since it got there on February 10th, all 3 components had stayed orbiting Mars. Well, that finally came to an end when they successfully landed their lander and the rover on May 14th. The goal of this mission is to study the geological structure of Mars and the structure's historical evolution. Another neat thing about this mission is that it's actually not too far from the Perseverance rover. It's only about 1,100 miles away. Here we have a map that shows all current and past missions on Mars. So we see that the Tianwen mission is over here on the right side, and then Perseverance is a little further west of that. Thank you so much for joining us today for our weekly video. Hope you learned something new. You should definitely try to go outside if you have a pair of binoculars and find M13 in the constellation of Hercules. And also catch that video about the lunar eclipse, because it'll be really cool to see how that moon starts to disappear and then turns into a blood red moon. And even if you don't want to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you can catch it a little afterwards. And stay tuned for our next video on the solar eclipse that is coming up on June 10th. If you like this video, be sure to give us a like, and if you want to stay up to date with our upcoming videos, subscribe to our channel. Like I said, we're going to have that upcoming video about the solar eclipse coming up, so that'll be a cool one. Thank you, and have a great week.